Hi and welcome back to Apple Cottage. Well, this is Sandy, it's Gardening Together, but I'm not in my kitchen this morning. I'm downstairs by my library. This wall is just from floor to ceiling, it's just bookshelves. And it has just tons and tons of books. Gardening books, cooking books, crafts, herbs, and then my fruit and berries. Like this section right here, all apple trees. And today's topic is fruit trees. As a suburban homesteader, I believe that fruit trees is just one more step, one more addition to your property that's important. These volumes right here, 7-volume set, it shows 17,000 different types of apples in the United States and Canada. 17,000. It's fabulous. They have fabulous drawings and paintings in there. They have just descriptions of every imaginable apple tree you can think of. Ones that you've never thought of. I find it so interesting. You go to the store and you maybe see 8 different types of apples. Here, talks about 17,000. There's something wrong with that picture. Well, now what kind of fruit trees could you add to your garden? Apples, of course. It's kind of a staple of American life. Pears, cherries, plums, mulberries. See, throughout my yard, I have my apples. I have pears. I have peaches, which people told me I couldn't grow peaches in Wyoming, but I have 6 peach trees, and last year I got peaches for the first year. So, woohoo, totally exciting. Cherries, people tell me I can't grow Bing cherries here. Not true. Sour cherries, mulberries. So I have some terraces in my backyard, and I have a food forest. So along my terraces, on the first row, there's apples and pears, and I just alternate them. The next row, it has peach, plum, peach, plum, peach. Then the top row, it has apples, cherries, and more apples. It's just so fun to add fruit trees. Now, why would you add fruit trees? Of course, main reason, because you could eat the fruit. But there's a lot more reasons for that. It really adds biodiversity to your property. It has habitats for birds, for insects, for native bees and honeybees. Aesthetically, it's just a great addition. Do you remember when you were little and you had a grandma or you had an aunt or a lady down the street had a big apple tree? So fun to climb. Now, I never let my fruit trees, any of my fruit trees, grow above about 10 feet. I don't want to have to get up on a tall ladder. So that's a choice that I make. A lot of times fruit trees, other than like stone fruit trees, like my apricot, I kind of make it go in a fan shape. I don't let it have a central leader. That means a tall trunk that goes straight up. I don't do that with my peach trees either. My plums, I just kind of prune. They're kind of wild. There's always sending branches all over the place. But you can really sculpt any of your fruit trees. If you don't want them very tall, then prune them every winter so that they don't get very tall. If you want them thinner, perhaps the way you planted them, there's not a lot of space, you can prune those side branches. There's a lot of ways. There's an art called espalier, and that's when they're literally pruning the fruit tree to make. Sometimes they do it against a wall or a fence, and they don't want it to come out from that fence. And so they prune it. It's basically flat. It has the branches that come out. Sometimes they're fan-shaped. Sometimes they just lean to the side. You have a whole bunch of trees, and they're all leaning. It's very interesting. So you get to choose how you want your fruit trees to be. And for me, I don't want them more than about 10 feet tall. Though, there are different types. Some are what they call a dwarf tree. It's never going to get over 8 feet tall because of the rootstock. Then there's the semi-dwarf tree, and that won't get more than 12 feet tall because of the rootstock. Because when you buy a tree, it's grafted. That means it has a separate rootstock, and the type of tree is grafted onto it. So when you buy it in the store, there'll be a little knot a little bit above the soil level, and that's where they grafted it. And so it just is more swollen right there. So depending on where you live, you could have a dwarf or a semi-dwarf. But in Wyoming, that's not something that's possible for me. Or I guess it's possible, but it's not something I would do. A couple reasons. A dwarf is very much a weaker tree. With our winds and our cold, I would have to have it staked its entire life. And dwarf trees might live 15 years. And I find that a waste of time. Why would I want a tree that's only going to live 15 years and I have to grow something else there? A semi-dwarf might live 20 years, 25 years. A standard, though, will grow, it could grow 100 years or longer. There's a pear tree on the East Coast that's over 400 years old and it still produces pears. There are several apple trees around the United States that are 200 and 300 years old, still producing apples. Those are all standard trees. Now the exception to that, of not having a grafted tree, would be if you grew it from seed. But when you grow, say, an apple from seed, you don't know what kind of apple that's going to be until probably 5 to 8 to 10 years later. Choices. I don't really mind that, and I have some in my yard that are from seeds because I find it interesting. If I don't like the apple, I'll just graft it. Now, most apple trees are grown as a central leader, which means it just has the trunk, goes straight up, and then it just has the branches that go off of it. Most of the time, a stone fruit, which would be a peach, a pear, a plum, an apricot, a lot of times when it starts to grow, they cut that and then they let the branches come out. The reason they do that is because they want more sunlight to go into the center so that fruit will ripen more. That's how I prune my stone fruit, just because I have found that it works much better. But you don't have to. You can prune them however you want to. Now I know that pruning any kind of fruit tree sometimes makes a person's heart pound because they think they're going to kill their tree. Not very likely. They are tough trees. So at my house, all of my trees are standards, even though I prune them so that they're more the size of a semi-dwarf. But that's just the way I want to do it. And I'm willing to take that time each winter or every other winter, because some of them I don't prune every winter, and to do that because I want that height. I want to be able to shape them. Some of my apple trees I'm growing as bushes. Some of them I'm growing so that they're becoming archways. Some are step-overs. That means they're not more than 18 inches tall. When it gets springtime, we're going to have so much fun because we can wander around the garden. I find it so interesting. Like on YouTube, on my Welcome to my channel, you see my front yard. But all the time, when people come in through the gate on the side, I can't even tell you how many people go, oh, I never expected this in Wyoming. Because it has turned from this barren wasteland to this amazing greenery of it. Some people just say you're living in a jungle. There's trees, there's plants, there's all these different heights, there's all these different colors and flowers. But I'm willing to do that work to do it. And so I love my fruit trees. I love the diversity. Now I have way more apples than I have anything else. But I don't want a monoculture, and so I want lots of other things, because you get bored of just one fruit. But if you had to choose, say you only have a limited space, you had to choose one type of fruit tree, I'd probably tell you to start with an apple. Now apples do need, and all fruit trees need, other fruit trees to pollinate, other than like a wild plum. They're pretty self-fertile. But don't be fooled when you go to the box store or a nursery and they say, oh, you don't need another tree. You can just have one. It's simply not true. Even my apple trees that say self-fertile, that means that I don't need another tree. Maybe I don't want just 2 apples off that tree. I want a multitude of apples. And so you need at least 2, and 2 different types of apples, 2 different types of peaches, 2 different types of plums, 2 different types of pears, so that you get really good cross-pollination with the bees and the insects. And then once you put them in the ground, or grow them in a pot, because there are people that grow them in a pot because of limited space, you can get your fruit trees. Now, most fruit trees do not produce the first year. Now, when you buy them from the box store, there are ways to manipulate trees so that you're buying it from the store, it's blooming, and maybe that first year you get apples. You didn't hardly have branches, just a few branches, and you're getting apples, and you go, Eureka! And you might even get them in the second year. But then all of a sudden you don't have apples, because that apple tree is not old enough, truly, to produce apples. It was just the way they grafted, and they did some things to the tree to trick it, and it only lasts for a while. So you have to be patient with fruit trees. But the benefits from them is just astronomical. And not only will you enjoy them, your children, your grandchildren can enjoy them. So if there was one thing to add into your suburban homestead, your garden, your patio, or even your balcony, add some fruit trees. Even if you only added one, more than likely a neighbor has one, or a neighbor has a crabapple, or a neighbor has a different type of pear. It's just a thought. You're planning for your garden this year, so why not add fruit trees to your garden? They'll be, when it gets a little bit closer to springtime, and when I start to graft, I'll do some videos. When it gets closer to springtime, and we can just really go out and we can see them starting to bud, and we can talk about them, and we can really go into more in-depth about specific fruits. Like I'll do a video just on apples. I'll do a video just on pears, on peaches, on plums, on mulberries, things like that. So we can really talk more. But for today, it's just gardening together. I want you to start thinking, planning, do some web searches, order some catalogs on different fruit trees, and just see what's out there that matches your zone, your area, your soils. And fruit trees will never disappoint. They are a fabulous addition. So this is Sandy at Apple Cottage. Always like, subscribe, Share it with the world. Tell your friends. I appreciate it. And really, I just really like to thank, I have 113 subscribers. Yes. I find that fantastic. I appreciate that people come by and they watch my videos, and I hope they glean certain tidbits of knowledge that will help them. I know it's wintertime and sometimes we don't want to think about gardens. It's not something that, oh, let's web search about a garden. I mean, I do it all the time, but I'm gonna. So, this is Sandy at Apple Cottage. Have a great day.